Ambassador Minji Park walked into the massive council chamber on Nexus Prime Station. Her black hair was pulled back in a tight bun, and her dark suit looked simple compared to the colorful robes and strange forms around her. She carried a small data pad and nothing else. Today would change everything. The chamber was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up to the curved ceiling. Thousands of alien beings sat in their designated areas. The tall Zephyrians looked like walking crystals that sparkle with inner light. The Kalari moved together like insects, their 4 arms always busy with some task. The ancient Etherians floated in glowing bubbles of energy. The Vorthans sat hunched over their endless paperwork. Minji had been humanity's voice in this place for 3 years. 3 long years of watching her people get treated like dangerous children. Every human invention was stolen and credited to other species. Every human colony was watched and controlled. Every human ship was searched and questioned. The Zephyrian speaker stood up, its crystal body making musical sounds as it moved. Today we vote on Resolution 847C. The cognitive compliance protocols will make the galaxy safer for all civilized species. Minji felt her hands clench into fists. She knew what those words really meant. The protocols would put devices in human brains to control their thoughts, to make them calm and obedient like the other species wanted, to kill everything that made humans special. The human species shows dangerous levels of aggression, said the Kalari Hive speaker, its voice coming from 12 mouths at once. They expand too fast. They ask too many questions. They change too quickly. They disturb a natural order, added an Etherian, its mental voice echoing in everyone's minds. Their thoughts are chaotic and unpredictable. This threatens galactic stability. Minji stood up. I request permission to speak for humanity. The speaker's crystal head turned toward her. The human delegate may speak, though the matter has already been decided by wiser minds than yours. Already decided. Minji had suspected as much, but hearing it confirmed made her stomach turn. This wasn't a debate. It was a trial where the verdict had been written before she even walked in. For 3 years, I have stood in this chamber and watched you take everything we offered, Minji said, her voice carrying clearly through the vast space. Human medicine saved billions of Kalari from the plague on Kepler. 442. Human technology fixed the quantum storms that were destroying Zephyrian trade routes. Human peacekeepers stopped the war between the Vorthans and the Nyx Empire. She looked around the chamber, meeting as many alien eyes as she could. And how did you repay us? You called us warlike when we defended ourselves. You called us greedy when we asked for fair trade. You called us dangerous when we refused to be your slaves. Angry sounds came from several sections of the chamber. The Vorthans shuffled their papers loudly. The Kalari clicked their mandibles in annoyance. The human speaks with typical arrogance, said the Etherian. Your species cannot see beyond its own primitive instincts. Primitive? Minji laughed, but there was no humor in it. We went from horses to starships in 200 years. Most of your species took 10,000 years to do the same thing. We solve problems you've been stuck on for centuries. We adapt to anything you throw at us. And you call that primitive? She walked forward, getting closer to the center of the chamber. You want to put controls in our brains because you're afraid. Afraid that we'll outgrow you. Afraid that we'll show the younger species there's another way to live. Afraid that your perfect, stable galaxy doesn't need you anymore. The chamber erupted in angry voices and sounds. The Zephyrian speaker made a noise like breaking glass to restore order. Enough. The vote will proceed. All in favor of Resolution 847C? Lights began appearing throughout the chamber as species after species voted yes. Green lights for the Zephyrians, blue for the Kalari, white for the Etherians, red for the Vorthans. Hundreds of other colors from hundreds of other species. When the counting was done, the numbers appeared in the air above the chamber in letters 10 feet tall. For the resolution, 847 species. Against, 1. Only humanity had voted no. The resolution passes, announced the speaker. Implementation will begin immediately. Minji reached into her jacket and pulled out a small device. It was silver and smooth, no bigger than her thumb. Every alien eye in the chamber focused on it. 3 years ago, when I first came here, I was hopeful, she said quietly, but her voice still carried to every corner of the chamber. I believed we could work together. I believed in the dream of a united galaxy. She held up the device. This is an emergency beacon. Every human ship, station, and colony as one. When I activate it, they'll all receive the same message. And what message is that? Asked the speaker, its voice full of crystal arrogance. Minji smiled, but her eyes were cold as space. Come home. All of you. Right now. She pressed a button. The device flashed once, then went dark. You've made your choice, she said, turning toward the exit. Now you get to live with what comes next. As she walked away, the aliens sat in confused silence. They had no idea what they had just unleashed. Captain June Kim stood on the bridge of his cargo ship, watching the last human family board the transport below. The Lim family had run a successful farm on Kepler 7 for 15 years. Now, they were packing everything they could carry and leaving the rest behind. Sir, that's everyone, reported Lieutenant Sora Han from her station. All 23,000 humans from this colony are ready to go. June nodded and looked at the planet one more time. Green fields stretched to the horizon, dotted with the strange purple trees that only grew on Kepler 7. Human farms sat next to Zephyrian crystal gardens and Kalari hive structures. It had been a good place to live. Until yesterday. What about our buildings? Our equipment? Asked Commander Hyun-Woo Lee, his second in command. Gone, June said simply. Every human-built structure has been demolished. Every piece of human technology has been destroyed or taken with us. We're leaving nothing behind. It was the same story across the galaxy. On 1,000 worlds, humans were packing up and going home. Farmers abandoned their fields. Merchants closed their shops. Scientists deleted their research and packed their labs. Teachers said goodbye to their alien students and walked away from schools they had built with their own hands. The aliens watched in confusion as their human neighbors disappeared overnight. At first, many of them were happy. The dangerous humans were finally going away. The galaxy would be peaceful again. Dr. Una Park had been working on a cure for Kalari bone rot disease for 6 years. She was only months away from finishing her research when the recall message came. As she packed her lab, her Kalari research partner, Zigzag, approached her. You cannot leave now, Zigzag said, its four arms gesturing frantically. The cure is almost ready. My people need this medicine. Una looked at the alien she had worked with every day for 6 years. They had shared meals, told stories about their families, and worked late into the night together. I'm sorry, she said, deleting the last of her research files. You should have thought about that before you voted to lobotomize us. But I did not vote. My hive was not even asked. Your leaders voted for you, Una replied, sealing her equipment cases. That's how your system works, remember? Now you get to live with their choices. Similar scenes happen everywhere. On Trade Station Alpha 7, human merchants shut down their businesses in a single day. The station's economy collapsed within hours. Captain Damon Choi had run supply runs to 12 different alien colonies. When he left, those colonies suddenly couldn't get the rare metals and medical supplies they needed. But we have contracts, protested Station Manager Vex 9, a tall Vorthan with too many arms. You cannot just leave. Read the fine print, Damon said, handing over a data pad. Every human contract has the same clause. If humanity is threatened with extinction, all agreements are void. Extinction? That is too dramatic. The protocols would only modify your behavior. Damon laughed coldly. You want to put machines in our brains to control our thoughts. What would you call that? The worst part for the aliens came when they tried to replace the humans. The Zephyrians discovered that their quantum computers had been running on human-designed processors for decades. Without human technicians to maintain them, the systems began failing. The Kalari found that their bio-ships couldn't navigate through hyperspace without human-created star charts. The Etherians realized that their prophecies had become unclear and clouded, as if humanity's departure had created blind spots in the future itself. On the border worlds, Pirate attacks increased by 400% in just 2 months. The human peacekeeping fleets had been the only thing keeping the raiders away. Now those ships were gone, heading back toward human space, and the pirates moved in like scavengers. Commander Min Ji-song had been leading anti-pirate operations in the Outer Rim for 5 years. Her fleet of 12 ships had kept an entire sector safe. Now she was taking her ships home. "Commander, we're receiving distress calls from 6 different colonies," reported her communications officer. "The Black Star pirates are attacking the mining station at Regulus 3. "Not our problem anymore," Minji said, though her voice was heavy with regret. "Set course for Sol System. Maximum speed. But those people will die." Then they should have thought about that before they decided we were too dangerous to exist. The strangest reports came from deep space monitoring stations. Ancient sensors that had watched the void between galaxies for millions of years began detecting unusual energy patterns. Something was moving out there in the darkness. Something vast and old. The Etherian Watchers, beings who could see possible futures, began having nightmares. In their visions, they saw great ships bearing human designs, but the beings inside them were no longer recognizably human. They saw darkness spreading between the stars. They saw their perfect galactic civilization burning. But every time they tried to look deeper into these visions, they found only emptiness. It was as if humanity's withdrawal had torn a hole in fate itself. Within 6 months, the Great Withdrawal was complete. Every human had returned to their home system. The borders of human space were sealed by defensive networks that made no sense to alien sensors. Probe ships that tried to enter human territory simply vanished without a trace. The galaxy had gotten what it wanted. The dangerous humans were contained in their small corner of space. They had no idea what they had unleashed. Dr. Yuna Shin pressed her face against the observation window of Defense Station Omega-1. 2 years had passed since humanity came home, and the view outside still made her dizzy. Where empty space should be, a web of energy stretched between massive metal structures. The defensive grid around Sol System looked like nothing she had ever seen before. "Status report, Doctor," came Admiral Dae-Hyun Park's voice behind her. He was Minji's younger brother, and now commanded humanity's transformed military forces. "The quantum barriers are holding at 900% of what our old science said was possible," Yuna replied, checking her instruments. "The dimensional anchors are stable, and the guests are still cooperative." She didn't like calling them guests. 3 years ago, desperate human scientists had torn holes in reality itself, looking for new physics, new weapons, anything to defend their species. What came through the holes had changed everything. The entities that emerged existed partly in their dimension and partly somewhere else. They offered knowledge in exchange for something humans couldn't quite understand yet. "Any word from the probe we sent to Kepler 7? asked the Admiral. Still silent, just like all the others. Yuna turned from the window. "The galaxy might as well not exist anymore. We can see it, but we can't touch it. Meanwhile, that galaxy was falling apart. On New Geneva, the mixed colony that humans had abandoned, Governor Zex Prime was facing his 3rd rebellion in 6 months. The Kalari workers had stopped maintaining the biosystems when human-made components started failing. The Zephyrian energy collectors were breaking down without human quantum processors. The Vorthan bureaucrats couldn't keep track of supply chains that humans had managed effortlessly for decades. "We need to contact the humans," Zex Prime told his council. "Offer them better terms. Apologize for the vote." "Impossible," replied his Etherian advisor. "We have sent 50 diplomatic ships toward human space. None have returned. Not destroyed, not captured. Simply gone, as if they never existed." The same pattern was happening everywhere. The Zephyrian Empire was fighting 3 separate wars because human mediators were no longer available to negotiate peace. Ancient trade routes had collapsed when human shipping companies vanished overnight. The delicate balance of galactic civilization was crumbling like a house made of paper. Captain Unji Lee sat in the ruins of Starbase Delta 7, which had been humanity's largest military outpost outside Sol System. The aliens had claimed it after the withdrawal, thinking they could use human technology. They were wrong. Every piece of equipment had been booby-trapped. When alien technicians tried to activate the base's defenses, half the station had simply vanished into another dimension. "Sir, we're detecting massive energy signatures from the direction of human space," reported her scanner operator, a young Kalari named Zik-9. "The readings don't match any known technology." "How massive?" Unji asked, though she wasn't sure she wanted to know. "Equivalent to the power output of an entire star, sir, but focus into geometric patterns we can't identify." Deep in the archives of the ancient Etherian temple, the oldest of the Watchers meditated in their crystal chambers. For millions of years, they had used their psychic abilities to guide galactic policy. They could see the threads of possibilities stretching into the future, warning of dangers and opportunities. Now, for the first time in their long existence, they were blind. "The human withdrawal has created a void in the timeline," reported Elder Seer Keth-9 to the Emergency Council. "We can see events leading up to their departure clearly. We can see fragments of what might happen centuries from now. But the next 50 years are hidden from us, as if covered by a dark cloud." "What does this mean?" asked Counselor Vex, 12, a Vorthan bureaucrat who had voted for the cognitive compliance protocols. "It means that humanity has become something beyond our ability to predict or understand. And worse, our brief glimpses of the far future show that something else is coming, something that feeds on civilizations like ours." The glimpses were terrifying. Ancient entities stirring in the void between galaxies, darkness spreading between stars, worlds going silent not through war or disaster, but through something that consumed them entirely. The Etherians had old names for these things from their earliest legends: the Devourers, the Consumers of Light, the Hunger Between Stars. But every time they tried to see more clearly, their vision showed only human ships in impossible formations, fighting against enemies that shouldn't exist. Ships that bore human designs but seemed to be made of living metal and contained energy. Crews that looked human but moved with perfect coordination, as if they shared a single mind. On the edge of Zephyrian space, monitoring station Epsilon, 2 detected something that made no sense. Deep space sensors that had watched the void for millions of years began picking up movement. Something vast was stirring in the darkness between galaxies. "Send a message to the Council," ordered Station Commander Hex 7, his crystal form flickering with worry. "Tell them the ancient warnings in our oldest databases are coming true. The things our ancestors feared are finally waking up." "What should we do?" asked the second-in-command. "Hex." 7 looked toward the distant glow of human space, where energy patterns continued to pulse in ways that broke their understanding of physics. "Pray that whatever the humans have become, it's enough to save us all." In the depths of space, ancient eyes opened for the first time in millions of years. The Devourers had been sleeping, waiting for the right moment. The galaxy civilizations had grown soft and divided. It was time to feed again. But first, they would have to deal with whatever humanity had become. The emergency session of the Galactic Council was in chaos when space itself began to bend. Every alien in the great chamber stopped talking and stared as reality twisted like heated metal. Warning alarms screamed from every direction as the station's sensors overloaded. Then silence fell like a heavy blanket. A single ship appeared in the docking bay, but calling it a ship wasn't quite right. It looked alive, its surface flowing like liquid silver mixed with starlight. Energy patterns danced across its hull in colors that had no names. Every instrument pointed at it simply stopped working. From this impossible vessel stepped a figure that made several delegates gasp in recognition. Ambassador Minji Park walked into the chamber, wearing the same simple black suit she had worn 3 years ago. But everything else about her had changed. Her eyes held depths that seemed to stretch beyond normal space. When she moved, the air around her shimmered like heat waves. And when she spoke, her voice carried harmonics that resonated in frequencies no natural throat could produce. "Honorable delegates," she began, and the sound made reality ripple like water. "Humanity returns with an offer." The Zephyrian speaker rose from his crystal throne, his form crackling with agitation. "Your barbaric species abandoned civilized society. You have no right to speak in this chamber." Minji smiled, and for just a moment, The delegates glimpsed something vast and incomprehensible behind her human appearance. 3 years ago, you voted to put control devices in our brains. You said we were too dangerous to exist unchanged. You forced us to discover just how dangerous we could become. She raised her hand, and holographic images filled the chamber. The delegates saw human settlements that defied physics, with buildings that existed in multiple dimensions at once. They saw humans working alongside beings made of pure energy, their bodies shifting between matter and light. They saw ships that moved through space by folding it like paper. We didn't waste these years feeling sorry for ourselves, Minji continued. We evolved. We made contact with entities that exist beyond your three-dimensional understanding. We unlocked secrets hidden in the quantum foam of space itself. We became something new. The Kalari Hive speaker clicked its mandibles nervously. Impossible. No species can change so much so quickly. That's what makes us human, Minji replied. We adapt to anything. And when you threaten to take away our ability to adapt, we adapted beyond anything you could imagine. The images changed, showing the darkness between galaxies beginning to stir. Ancient forms of impossible size moved through the void like sleeping giants waking up. Even through the holograms, the delegates could feel the cold hunger radiating from those shapes. Elder Seer Keth 9 of Etherians floated forward in his energy bubble. The Devourers, he whispered, his mental voice filled with ancient terror. The consumers of worlds. Our oldest prophecies spoke of their return. Your prophecies were correct, Minji said. They've been sleeping in the dark spaces for millions of years, waiting for the right moment. Your fractured galaxy, weakened by war and division, has finally woken them up. She gestured again, and the images showed massive entities emerging from black holes, feeding on entire star systems. Where they passed, space itself seemed to grow darker. They consume more than just matter and energy, Minji explained. They eat civilizations. They devour the very concept of life itself. And they're coming here. Panic began spreading through the chamber. Representatives from hundreds of species started shouting at once. The Vorthan delegates shuffled through their papers frantically, looking for some bureaucratic solution. The Zephyrians crackled with barely controlled energy. Silence, boomed the speaker. If what you say is true, what can be done? Our greatest fleets, our most advanced weapons, they would be useless against such beings. Your current level of cooperation would be useless, Minji agreed. But we can help you survive. Not as your masters ruling over subjects. Not as your superiors guiding primitives. As partners. As equals. The word equals caused another explosion of angry voices. For thousands of years, the Galactic Council had been built on hierarchy. Older species guided younger ones. More advanced civilizations controlled less developed ones. The idea of true partnership was revolutionary. What you're suggesting is impossible, protested the Vorthan Chancellor. The natural order cannot be overturned. The natural order is already broken, Minji said calmly. Look around you. Your empire is crumbling. Your trade routes are failing. Your colonies are in revolt. Your old ways have made you weak. She walked closer to the center of the chamber, and with each step, reality seemed to bend around her. We offer you something better. A new way of doing things. A civilization based on cooperation instead of domination. Innovation instead of stagnation. Growth instead of control. And if we refuse, asked the Etherian elder, Minji's expression grew sad. Then you'll face the Devourers alone. And you'll lose. Every single one of you. The chamber fell silent as the weight of her words sank in. Through the great windows, they could see human ships beginning to appear in the distance. Not the crude metal vessels of 3 years ago, but impossible craft that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions at once. How long do we have? Asked the speaker quietly. The first scouts will arrive in 6 months, Minji replied. The main force will be here within a year. Choose quickly. Time is running out for all of us. She turned toward her ship, then paused. Oh, and delegates? This time, the choice really is yours. But choose wisely. The universe is about to change, whether you're ready for it or not. Commander Taemin Young stood on the bridge of the U.S. Ascension, watching reality tear apart at the edges. The Devourers had arrived exactly when Minji said they would, emerging from a void between galaxies like living nightmares. Each one was the size of a moon, but they existed partly outside normal space, making them hard to see and harder to fight. All fleet units, execute Pattern Omega-7. Taemin commanded. His voice was calm, but around him, his crew moved with impossible coordination. They were still human in appearance, but something far more in essence. 3 years of evolution had changed them in ways the old galaxy couldn't understand. The human fleet was unlike anything that had ever existed. Ships that could be in multiple places at the same time. Weapons that rewrote the laws of physics as they fired. Strategies that worked across parallel timelines. But the most amazing thing was how they worked with their former enemies. Captain Eun-ji Lee, her body now shifting between flesh and energy, coordinated directly with Etherian precogs floating in their crystal chambers. She could see their possible futures, and they could see hers, creating a web of shared knowledge that let them predict the Devourer's movements before they made them. Devourer formation changed into Pattern 7 Alpha, reported an Etherian watcher, its mental voice touching every mind in the fleet at once. They're adapting to our tactics. Then we adapt faster, Eun-ji replied, her consciousness splitting across 12 different probability streams. Lieutenant Minho interfaced with the Kalari coordination networks. Lieutenant Minho Kong nodded and pressed his hand against a bioorganic control panel. His nervous system merged temporarily with the Kalari hive mind, letting him coordinate thousands of ships as if they were parts of a single organism. The alien crews no longer seemed strange to him. After working together against the coming darkness, they had become family. All Kalari assault wings responding, he reported. They're moving in perfect formation. Major Sun Young Han directed the Zephyrian energy constructs with gestures that bent space around her fingers. The crystalline beings had learned to channel their power through human quantum processors, creating weapons that could hurt things that barely existed in their reality. Zephyrian strike teams are in position, she announced. Energy collectors are at maximum charge. But the Devourers were not easy enemies. They had consumed thousands of galaxies over billions of years. They learned from every civilization they destroyed. As the Allied fleet attacked, the dark entities began changing their tactics. One Devourer split into a dozen smaller forms and tried to surround a group of Vorthan defensive platforms. The bureaucratic aliens had surprised everyone by being excellent at logistics, keeping supplies flowing to battle fleets with impossible efficiency. Vorthan platforms are surrounded, shouted communications officer Hygiene Park. They're requesting immediate support. On our way, replied Captain Dongmin Kim, his ship folding space to appear between the Devourers and the platforms. All units cover supply lines. Without them, we're dead in space. The battle raged across multiple dimensions. Reality itself became a weapon as human strategists turned the Devourer's own consuming nature against them. They created pocket universes filled with poisonous matter that made the entities sick. They folded space so that Devourers trying to eat one star system found themselves trying to eat their own tails instead. Admiral Daehyun Park coordinated the entire battle from his command ship. His consciousness expanded across hundreds of vessels. He had become something like a living computer, processing information from 1,000 different sources, and making decisions faster than any normal mind could follow. Devourer main force is retreating toward the galactic edge, he announced. But they're not giving up. They're regrouping for another attack. Let them come, said Minji Park, appearing beside him like a ghost made of starlight. She was no longer just an ambassador. She had become something like the living spirit of human evolution, existing partly in normal space and partly in dimensions that had no names. Sister, are you sure we can win this? Daehyun asked. We're not trying to win, Minji replied with a smile that held galaxies. We're trying to teach. Watch. The retreating Devourers suddenly found themselves surrounded not by weapons, but by something far more dangerous. Ideas. Human ships began broadcasting the stories of every civilization in the galaxy. The tale of Zephyrian artists who made sculptures from pure energy. The saga of Kalari engineers who built cities that grew like living things. The chronicles of Etherian philosophers who spent centuries thinking a single deep thought. For the first time in billions of years, the Devourers encountered something they couldn't consume, the creative spirit that made civilizations worth protecting. The dark entities, faced with pure innovation and growth instead of stagnant order, began to retreat deeper into the void. "They're leaving," whispered an Etherian watcher in amazement, not defeated, but confused. "They don't understand what we become." As the last Devourer disappeared into the darkness between galaxies, the Allied fleets began counting their losses and celebrating their victory. But the real change was already happening around them. The rigid bureaucracy of the old Galactic Council was dissolving, replaced by something that had never existed before, a truly cooperative civilization. Humans worked alongside Zephyrians to build new kinds of art. Kalari learned individual creativity from their human partners. Etherians discovered that chaos could be just as beautiful as order. Minji stood on the observation deck of her ship, watching former enemies work together to repair battle damage and plan for the future. The galaxy would never be the same. And that was exactly what it needed. "You tried to clip our wings, keep us grounded," she said softly, her words carrying to every ship in the fleet. "Instead, you taught us to soar beyond the stars themselves."